The first thing Darlene Voss ever said to me was, "Get your people off my land before I call the sheriff." The funny part was, I had signed the deed to that land 6 days earlier, paid for it with money I had been saving since I was 29, and was standing beside a tent I had personally hauled out of my truck. But there she was, marching through the tall grass in oversized sunglasses and a denim jacket, pointing at me like I had broken into her house and started frying bacon in her kitchen. My name is Mason Carter, and up until that week, I thought buying 36 acres outside a little place called Redfield, Tennessee, was going to be the calmest decision I ever made. My brother-in-law Troy, my old college friend Ben, and I had been looking for a piece of land for almost a year, somewhere quiet enough to fish, camp, maybe build a couple of small cabins one day when we had more time and a little more money. We found this old pasture on the edge of Pine Ridge Road, with a shallow creek running through the middle, a withered barn in the back, and one huge sycamore tree that looked like it had been standing there before half the county existed. The seller was an older man named Mr. Gelt. Bell, polite as could be, and he told us straight up that he had not used the property much in years. There was no HOA, no shared access agreement, no conservation easement, no neighborhood board, nothing complicated, just land, a clean title, and 3 guys who could not believe they had finally pulled it off. So that Friday morning we loaded coolers, folding chairs, fishing rods, a little grill, and enough food to feed a church picnic, then drove out there for our first weekend as landowners. For about 45 minutes, it was perfect. We set up under the sycamore, Ben got the firing going, Troy was already talking about where he wanted to put a horseshoe pit, and I remember standing there with a cup of coffee, looking at the creek sparkle through the grass, thinking, man, this is it. This is ours. Then Darlene came over the hill. She did not introduce herself. She did not ask who we were. She came in hot, shouting that we were trespassing, ruining her walking trail and frightening the wildlife. I tried to stay polite because, honestly, I thought maybe there had been some misunderstanding. I told her we had bought the place from Mr. Bell. I even offered to grab the paperwork from the truck. She did not want to see it. That man would never sell this land, she said, her voice shaking in that way people get when they are trying hard not to admit they are scared. My family has been coming out here for 20 years. I said, I understand that, ma'am, but using land for years is not the same as owning it. That was when her face changed. Not angry exactly, not at first. Hurt, then angry. You people think a piece of paper makes you belong here, she said. Ben, who has never met a tense moment he could not make worse, muttered, well, usually that is kind of what a deed does. I gave him a look, but it was too late. Darlene stepped closer and said she was calling the sheriff. I told her she could call whoever she wanted. We were not leaving. The next morning, a deputy pulled up to our campsite with that tired expression people get when they already know the whole story before they step out of the vehicle. I handed him the deed, the county transfer record, and the purchase agreement. He checked every page, nodded once, then looked across the field at Darlene standing beside her SUV, with her arms folded tight across her chest. Ma'am, he called out, they own the property. For a second she looked stunned. Then she yelled that the papers were fake, that Mr. Bell had been manipulated, that the county had made a mistake. The deputy told her not to file another false report. She stared at us for a long moment, then said something I did not understand until much later. You have no idea what you took. After that, she got in her SUV and drove away. We laughed it off at first, because what else were we supposed to do? But that afternoon, animal control showed up because someone had reported illegal traps near the creek. An hour later, a game warden came looking for evidence of poaching. By sunset, I was sitting beside the fire with a knot in my stomach, realizing Darlene was not trying to win an argument. She was trying to make us disappear. And once I understood that, the whole weekend started to feel different. The land was still beautiful. The creek was still running clear. The sycamore still threw that wine shade across our campsite every afternoon. But there was this strange pressure sitting over everything, like we were not camping anymore, like we were waiting for something to happen. Darlene did not show up that evening, which somehow made it worse. Ben kept looking toward the ridgeline every time the wind moved the grass, and Troy started joking that she was probably hiding behind a tree with binoculars and a legal pad. We laughed, but nobody laughed very hard. The next morning she came back with 2 women from down the road, both dressed like they had planned the whole thing over coffee and Facebook messages. Darlene stood in front of our fire ring with a stack of papers tucked under one arm and announced that the local community had decided we needed to leave within 24 hours. I asked her what community she was talking about, because the nearest actual town was 15 minutes away and the only thing between us and it was a gas station, a feed store, and a church with a cracked white steeple. She lifted the papers and said, "The Pine Ridge Community Preservation Council." Ben looked at the women behind her, then at me, and said under his breath, "That sounds made up." Darlene heard him. "It is not made up," she snapped. Darlene heard him. "It is not made up," she snapped. "We are protecting this valley from people who do not understand what it means." I took one of the papers from her hand. It was a petition, printed from somebody's home computer, full of phrases like historic use rights, environmental heritage, and community access. There was not a single county seal, legal citation, or real authority anywhere on it, just 20-something signatures from people who either lived near the road or had apparently walked through Mr. Bell's pasture whenever they felt like it. I handed it back and said, "Darlene, I'm sorry this land means something to you, but Mr. Bell owned it. He sold it. We bought it. We bought it. That is the whole story." She looked at me for a long time, and when she spoke again, her voice was lower. "No, that is not the whole story." Then she pointed toward the creek. "My husband taught our son to fish right there. My daughter used to swing from that sycamore branch until she got blisters on her hands. We came here every Sunday after church for years. This place was ours before you ever knew it existed." I did not know what to say for a second, because there was something real in that. Not legal, not fair, but real. She had memories there, and maybe she had been carrying them around so long that they had turned into a kind of ownership in her mind. I almost felt sorry for her. Then Troy stepped forward and said, "Mom, nobody is trying to take your memories, but you cannot use them to kick people off land they paid for." That hit her harder than I expected. Her face tightened. Her eyes got wet for half a second, and then the anger came rushing back like she had slammed a door on something softer underneath. "You have no idea what you are starting," she said. Then she turned and walked away with the other two women trailing behind her. We stood there in silence until Ben finally said, "Well, that was less funny than the invisible trail thing." He was right. Up until then, Darlene had been annoying, even ridiculous. After that, she felt dangerous, not because she had power, but because she believed she should have it. We spent the rest of the day fishing, grilling burgers, and trying to act normal, but every hour another vehicle came down the dirt lane. Environmental Health showed up over a report that we were contaminating the creek. Code enforcement came because somebody said we were putting up unapproved structures. The man from Code enforcement looked around at our two tents, a pop-up canopy, and Troy's folding table, then asked, "Is this the unauthorized development?" Troy pointed at the canopy and said, "We went a little wild with it." The inspector actually laughed, which was the first good sign we had all day. Before he left, he leaned close and told me quietly, "You might want to start documenting every time she comes onto your property. She has a history." I asked him what kind of history. He gave me a look that said he was not supposed to answer, then said, "The kind that makes county employees recognize the name before they finish reading the complaint." That night, we sat around the fire longer than usual. Nobody said much at first. I kept thinking about Darlene standing by the creek, talking about her children, about her husband, about Sunday afternoons that were probably gone for good. I understood grief. My dad had passed when I was younger, and there were places I still could not drive past without feeling something pull at me. But grief can do weird things to people. It can make them protect what they love, or it can make them grab at things that were never theirs to hold. Around midnight, Ben broke the silence. "You know what would really make her mad?" I told him not to say it. He grinned anyway. "A cabin." Troy laughed first, then looked at me. "Actually, he is not wrong. We bought this place because we wanted something permanent someday. Why are we acting like we need permission to enjoy it?" I stared out across the dark field toward the creek. The moon was low and the water caught just enough light to shine between the trees. I had thought about building there before, of course. A small cabin with a front porch, maybe a second one later if we ever decided to bring our families out. A place that would not disappear when the tents came down. But until that moment, it had just been a daydream. Then it started to feel like an answer, not revenge. not a challenge. An answer. The next morning we drove into town and bought survey flags, measuring tape, a few stakes, and enough supplies to rough out where a cabin might sit. We were not breaking ground yet, we were just planning. But Darlene saw us pulling back in. She came out of her house in pajama pants, a faded robe and house slippers, moving faster than I had ever seen anyone move in house slippers. "What are those?" she yelled as she crossed the field. I told her they were survey markers. She looked at the bright orange flags in Troy's hand like they were explosives. "You are not building here," she said. "We have not decided anything yet," I told her. "You do not get to decide anything yet," she shouted. Then she grabbed one of the flags and yanked it from the ground so hard, the thin fiberglass rod snapped in her hand. For a second, she just stood there holding the broken piece, staring at it like she had not meant to go that far. Then she looked at me and said, "If you build on this land, I will stop you. Not I will complain. Not I will call someone. I will stop you." And as she walked away, I watched her disappear behind the trees, feeling the same cold knot return to my stomach. Because this time, I believed her. For the next 2 days, we did exactly what we said we were going to do. We called the county ourselves, asked what permits were required, hired a local contractor named Wes Holloway, and made sure every piece of paper was where it needed to be before a single post went into the ground. I was not interested in proving a point anymore. I wanted to build something solid, something nobody could argue with. When the lumber truck arrived that Thursday morning, Darlene came flying down the hill before the driver had even lowered the first bundle of boards. She was wearing jeans, a rain jacket, and that same look she had the first day, except now there was panic behind it. "You cannot unload that," she yelled at the driver. "This land is under community review." The driver looked at me, then at the address on his paperwork, then back at her. "Ma'am, this order is paid in full." Darlene pointed at the lumber like it had personally betrayed her. "You are helping them destroy this valley." Wes stepped out of his truck, a quiet man with gray in his beard and a tape measure clipped to his belt, and asked if she had a court order. Darlene pulled out a pink sheet of paper folded in half. At the top it said, "Pine Ridge Community Emergency, Stop Work. Notice." Wes read it for maybe 3 seconds, then handed it back. "This is not a court order," he said. "This looks like it came off somebody's printer." Darlene's face went red. "It is official community documentation." Ben, standing behind me with a coffee in his hand, whispered, "The pink paper really gives it authority." I should have told him to stop, but I was tired and I laughed. That was the moment Darlene lost whatever little control she had left. She screamed at us, screamed at Wes, screamed at the delivery driver, then ran back to her SUV and tore off down the lane so fast she threw gravel across the grass. By noon, the first cabin posts were in the ground. By sunset, she returned with a convoy of cars, a dozen people carrying homemade signs, and a man named Curtis Lane who introduced himself as president of the Pine Ridge Community Preservation Council. I had never heard of Curtis before that day. He wore cargo shorts, mirrored sunglasses, and spoke like he was addressing Congress. He said they were filing an injunction. Wes asked to see it. Curtis said it was being prepared. Ben asked, "Prepared by who?" Curtis looked toward Darlene. Nobody answered. The group stood around our cabin site chanting things like, "Save our valley and stop private greed," which was strange considering we were standing on private land that we had legally bought. A few of the older neighbors looked uncomfortable. One woman asked Darlene if the county had approved the build. Wes handed her a copy of the permit. Another man asked if Mr. Bell had sold the property willingly. I told him yes and showed him the signed transfer. Slowly, the crowd started to shift. People stopped chanting. Curtis stopped talking. Darlene looked around and realized the little army she had built was beginning to see what we had seen all along. This was never about saving the land. It was about her refusing to let go of a place she felt entitled to. The sheriff came out again that afternoon, told everyone they were trespassing, and gave Darlene one final warning. I thought that would be the end of it. It was not. The next morning was quiet, almost too quiet. I was down by the creek checking a line when Troy yelled from the hill, "Mason, get up here." I ran toward him, and when I reached the clearing, my stomach dropped. Darlene was standing beside an orange bulldozer parked on her side of the property line. The blade was pointed straight toward the cabin frame. I remember Ben saying very softly, "She would not." Then Darlene climbed into the seat. The engine turned over with a deep, ugly roar, and she looked down at us through the dirty glass. "If you will not stop building," she shouted, "then I will stop it for you." The bulldozer lurched forward. Everything happened fast after that. Wes yelled for his crew to move. Troy ran toward the cabin. I ran uphill, screaming Darlene's name, telling her to shut it down. But she kept coming, bouncing over the uneven ground, pushing through stacks of lumber, sending boards flying across the field. Then the sirens hit. 2 sheriff's cruisers came around the bend just as Darlene tried to turn. She hit the wrong lever. The bulldozer swung sideways, carved a trench through the dirt, and stopped maybe 6 feet from the cabin. Deputies pulled her from the machine while she cried that the land had been her family's place, that nobody understood what she had lost. And standing there, watching her break apart, I did understand some of it, but I also understood this: pain does not give you the right to destroy other people. The cabin was finished 3 weeks later. The porch faced the creek. The sycamore still stood over the field, and for the first time since we bought the place, it was quiet. But I still think about Darlene sometimes, and I still wonder where the line is between remembering a place and believing you own it. So tell me, were we right to keep building, or should we have tried harder to make peace before everything went too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments, share this story with someone who has dealt with a neighbor from hell, and subscribe for more stories where the truth finally catches up with the loudest person in the room.